My name is Daniel Ives, and I'm a ghost from a past that no one remembers. Or more accurately, I'm haunted by a ghost of the past. The Phoenix Dawn I mission. The Mars landing on March 7th, 2019. Sounds like a headline that should have shaken the world, right? An American triumph? A new era of space exploration? Elon Musk probably dancing a jig on the roof of his Cybertruck. But about this, there's only silence. A complete, absolute, suffocating silence. It's like someone hit a giant delete button for the entire planet. My obsession began simply enough with a term paper on the history of journalism at Portland State University. The topic? Media coverage of NASA breakthroughs in the 21st century. I was digging through the digital archives of the Associated Press, Reuters, the New York Times, looking for something beyond routine satellite launches and ISS reports. And that's when, deep in some forgotten subsection of a little-known science journal's website, I stumbled upon a fragment of an article. Just a couple of lines. The Phoenix Dawn I mission to Mars is expected to launch in late 2018, with a planned landing in the spring of 2019. The publication date was June 2017. And that was it. Nothing more. I started digging deeper, and the deeper I dug, the stranger it got. The official NASA website? Not a word about Phoenix Dawn I. The SpaceX site, which, based on scraps of information, was involved in the project, same thing. I scoured amateur astronomy forums, conspiracy websites, news archives for 2019. Nothing. There were articles about Mars quakes detected by the InSight lander, about preparations for the Mars 2020 mission, Perseverance, but not a single mention of a manned mission that was supposed to have happened in between. It was as if it had been surgically excised from the timeline. It became personal. I abandoned my term paper, started skipping lectures. My small apartment in Hawthorne turned into a madman's headquarters, walls covered in printouts, diagrams, and article fragments connected by red string. I tore through the archives of the local paper, the Oregonian, then drove to Seattle to the Central Library. I wasn't looking for digital traces. Those were too easy to erase, but physical ones. Microfilm, bound newspaper volumes. And I found it. Not exactly screaming proof, more like a whisper from the past. In the archive of a small university radio station at the University of Washington, among decommissioned equipment and dusty boxes of cassettes, I found a metal case labeled PD1 archive feed, do not erase. Inside wasn't a cassette, but an old, thick reel-to-reel magnetic tape, the kind used for studio recording 30 or 40 years ago. The label was faded but clear. PHOENIX, Dawn, I, MARSLANDING, live feed backup, 037-2019. My heart started pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Finding a player for such a tape was a quest in itself, but I got lucky. In that same basement stood an ancient Studer studio recorder, covered in a layer of dust but still functional. I carefully mounted the reel, threaded the tape with trembling hands, put on a pair of studio headphones I found nearby, and pressed play. At first, there was hiss, loud, all-encompassing. Then a voice broke through, distorted by interference, but recognizable, the voice of an official NASA commentator, confirming separation of the landing module, Columbia Ares in stable orbit, expecting atmospheric entry in... The voice was cut off by a sharp burst of static. And then something else began. Underneath the layer of static and fragmented phrases from mission control in Houston, a low, barely perceptible hum was pulsating. It didn't sound like a technical glitch. It felt physical, a pressure in my temples, a faint nausea. I increased the volume, trying to make out the words, but the hum intensified. It was infrasound. I'd read about its effects: panic, disorientation, visual and auditory hallucinations. But there was something more here. It felt as if the very air in the musty basement was vibrating. My vision swam, and a sharp, throbbing pain shot through the back of my head, like someone had driven a red-hot nail into it. I ripped the headphones off. The headache didn't vanish, but it became bearable. I rewound the tape a little and played it again, at minimum volume. The commentator's voice. 7 minutes of terror completed successfully, altitude 10 kilometers, parachutes deployed. Again, that hum, quieter now, but no less palpable. It was rhythmic, but wrong, off-kilter. It evoked a deep, irrational sense of dread, as if I were eavesdropping on something forbidden, something my brain was desperately trying to reject. I sat there for hours, playing the tape in fragments, taking notes, trying to ignore the pulsing pain and the growing sense of fear. The tape held snippets of the crew's chatter, commands from Houston, exclamations of joy upon landing, and that underlying, vibrating background noise, which at times grew louder, drowning out everything else. Sometimes it formed a semblance of a rhythm. A long tone, a short one, a long one, 2 short ones, like a distorted, sinister Morse code. I understood 2 things. First, the Phoenix Dawn I mission was real. Second, something terrible happened there, on Mars, and this tape was the only remaining evidence. Evidence that was dangerous in and of itself. Evidence that the world didn't just forget, it was made to forget. And now that forgotten horror lay in my hands, humming with infrasound and promising to reveal a secret that, perhaps, was better left buried in the red dust of Mars. Reconstructed fragments of the tape and recovered scraps of data. Summer 2017. The air in the conference room at the Johnson Space Center in Houston was thick with a mixture of conditioned cold and unspoken tension. There were about 30 of us, the best of the best, selected from across the country. Air Force pilots with thousands of flight hours, engineers with PhDs from MIT and Caltech, geologists, biologists, medics. We had all passed through a sieve of grueling tests, psychological evaluations, and endless interviews. And now, we were sitting before him. General Clive Ripley, gray-haired, lean, with eyes the color of polar ice, and the steel posture of a man accustomed to giving orders that were not to be questioned. He embodied NASA's old guard, the one that remembered Apollo and the shuttles, but was now forced to share the stage with new players. Ladies and gentlemen, his voice was even, emotionless, but each word landed with the weight of a stone. You are here because America is once again ready to step beyond the bounds of the possible. Project Phoenix Dawn 1 is not just another flight. It is a landing. Man will once again set foot on another planet, on Mars. A restrained murmur of approval swept through the room. We all knew this, but to hear the official confirmation, it was something else. The mission is made possible by an unprecedented collaboration between NASA and SpaceX, Ripley continued, nodding toward the rocket company's logo on the screen behind him. The ship, the Columbia Ares, is a hybrid marvel of engineering, capable of delivering a crew of 7 to Mars, supporting their work on the surface for 3 months, and bringing them home. The image on the screen changed. A sleek, futuristic-looking spacecraft, clearly combining NASA's proven technologies with Musk's innovative designs. Your commander is Colonel Mark Rourke. Ripley gestured to a man in his mid-40s sitting in the front row. Rourke gave a short nod. An Air Force veteran, 2 shuttle flights, a reputation as a tough but fair leader. His face looked as if it were carved from granite, his gaze direct and heavy. Rumor had it that after a tour in Afghanistan, he had become a bit withdrawn, but his professionalism was unquestionable. Next to him sat the pilot, Ben "Buddy" Hayes. Rourke's polar opposite, young, smiling with perpetually messy hair, known for his sense of humor and masterful piloting. They said he could land a brick on a dime. Key science specialists: Dr. Lydia West, hydrogeologist and astrobiologist. I saw a young woman with eyes burning with enthusiasm and a shock of red hair blush slightly. Lydia was the soul of the program. Her belief in the possibility of finding signs of life on Mars was almost contagious. She was an idealist, a dreamer, which sometimes led to friction with the pragmatic Rourke. I remember an argument they had during training. Lydia insisted on a riskier route for the rover, closer to a canyon where, in her opinion, traces of ancient water might be preserved, while Rourke demanded strict adherence to the original, safer plan. Dr. Elena Cruz, medical engineer; Ezra Cole, systems engineer; Emily Randolph, geologist, seismologist; Oliver Zhang, biomicrobiologist. Ripley listed the rest. Elena, calm, collected, with a quiet smile and a cross around her neck. Ezra, a quiet electronics genius, a bit of a recluse after some incident in the lab. Emily, sharp-tongued, cynical, but an incredibly reliable specialist. Oliver, a good-natured, heavy-set man obsessed with DNA and microbes. The dream team, at least on paper. The briefing was coming to an end. Ripley swept the room with a heavy gaze. "There's one more thing. Off the record." He paused. "Our orbital probes and ground-based telescopes have detected some anomalous activity in the vicinity of the proposed landing site on Elysium Planitia, a radio-optical anomaly, as we're calling it." A hush fell over the room. "What kind of anomaly, sir?" asked Lydia, her voice trembling with curiosity. "Hard to say for sure," Ripley shrugged. "Sporadic bursts of radio emissions on unusual frequencies. Visually, we sometimes observe effects similar to a heat haze or light distortion, where, by the laws of physics, they shouldn't exist. Possibly an unknown atmospheric phenomenon, possibly geological activity, or just interference." He smirked, but his eyes remained cold. "Some of our consultants, let's say from regions near White Sands where our communications hub is, have mentioned old Navajo legends about desert spirits or wandering lights that supposedly cause similar effects. Nonsense, of course, but the anomaly is there." He waved his hand, cutting off further questions. "It shouldn't affect the mission. The landing zone has been selected with all safety factors in mind, but you need to be aware. Any unusual instrument readings, any visual oddities, report them to Houston immediately. That's an order." At the time, his words seemed like just a standard precaution. None of us, not those sitting in the room, nor me listening to a distorted recording 2 years later, could have imagined what that radio-optical anomaly really meant. That it wasn't just interference or an atmospheric phenomenon, that it was a harbinger, a whisper of an ancient, incomprehensible horror slumbering beneath the red sands of Mars. A whisper that would soon become a scream. The launch from Cape Canaveral was flawless. The SpaceX rocket soared into the Florida sky on a pillar of fire, to the applause of millions. The Columbia Ares set its course for the Red Planet. 7 souls hurtling toward a fate that Earth would choose to forget. From reconstructed fragments of the tape and recovered scraps of data. March 7th, 2019. Billions of eyes are glued to screens. Not just in the U.S., all over the world. The live broadcast of the Phoenix Dawn 1 landing was running on every conceivable channel. NASA had orchestrated it as a grand spectacle, the pinnacle of American achievement. Tense anticipation filled mission control in Houston. On my tape, I can hear fragments of voices, altitude control, velocity checks, confirmation signals from the Columbia Aries, and underneath it all, a faint but insistent low-frequency hum picked up by sensitive microphones. The same hum that gave me a migraine. The landing site, Elysium Planitia. A vast volcanic plain, relatively smooth, chosen for its safety and proximity to the equator, and also for its strategically convenient location for communicating with Earth via the powerful Deep Space Network complex at White Sands, New Mexico. This detail, the connection to the desert southwest of the U.S., would later seem ominously symbolic to me. The 7 minutes of terror, as they call it at NASA, the time from atmospheric entry to touchdown, 7 minutes of radio silence due to the plasma sheath around the descent vehicle, 7 minutes when Houston could only wait and hope. On the tape, this moment is almost silent. Just static, crackle, and the pulse of infrasound which seems louder than ever. And then, an explosion of applause in mission control. Signal reacquired. Commander Rourke's voice, calm, almost monotonous. Houston, this is Phoenix 1. Touchdown confirmed. We are on Mars. The first image from a landing camera appeared on screens worldwide. A blurry, reddish-orange landscape under a pale sky. Dust, rocks, an endless dead plain. But it was another world. Next on the protocol, systems check, pressurizing the airlock, preparing for the first EVA. Dr. Lydia West was supposed to be the first to step onto the surface. She had prepared for this her whole life, rehearsed her speech, something about humanity's dream, the search for life. But Buddy Hayes, the pilot, as always, went off script. Apparently he was the first to get to a porthole or access an external camera, his voice full of boyish excitement and completely out of place in the solemnity of the moment, burst onto the airwaves, preempting everyone. Damn! It's a dead ringer for the Mojave Desert! Just redder! Hey Mark, I'll bet you $100 there's a gas station with cold beer just over that hill. An awkward silence fell over mission control for a second. Then someone laughed nervously. Rourke muttered something to Hayes over the internal comms. On the tape, it sounds like an unintelligible growl, but Buddy's words had already spread across the world. Like the Mojave. That phrase, linking an alien dead planet to a sun-scorched desert in the American Southwest, where old legends spoke of strange lights and unexplained disappearances, became the unofficial motto of the first hours on Mars. As the crew prepared for the EVA, external sensors began transmitting data. Atmospheric pressure, temperature, minus 76 degrees Fahrenheit, radiation levels, all within expected parameters, except for one. Seismographs and acoustic sensors were picking up a strange high-frequency background noise, above 18 kilohertz, on the edge of ultrasound. Houston, this is Ezra, the voice of systems engineer Cole sounded puzzled. We're detecting a steady ultrasonic signal of unknown origin. The frequency is fluctuating between 18 and 22 kilohertz. Amplitude is low, but the signal structure is rhythmic. It sounds like a heartbeat, a very fast one. Say again, Phoenix 1? Mission Control responded. Can't pinpoint the source. It seems to be everywhere, Ezra continued. I'm checking the equipment for possible interference. Maybe it's some kind of resonance in the hull after landing. But it wasn't resonance. On the tape, I can hear Emily Randolph, the geologist-seismologist, join the discussion. Seismic sensors are also picking up micro vibrations synchronous with this ultrasound. It doesn't look like geological activity. It's too regular. Like a heartbeat, someone from Mission Control clarified. Yeah, Emily confirmed. Or something like it. Something big. A pause hung in the air. Outside, beyond the thin walls of the landing module, stretched the dead red desert, a planet believed to be lifeless. But something out there, in that emptiness, was emitting a sound like the beating of a giant, invisible heart. An ultrasound that only instruments could detect, and an infrasound that pressed on my temples and made me nauseous, listening to this recording 2 years later in a dusty basement on Earth. The first EVA proceeded as planned, albeit with a slight delay. Lydia West descended the ladder, leaving the first human footprint on Elysium Planitia in decades, since the Apollo missions on the Moon. Her words were full of pathos and hope, but the transmission was plagued by interference. From time to time, the image on viewer screens would ripple, and Lydia's voice would distort with short bursts of static. And through her speech, if you listened very carefully, you could discern that same ultrasonic pulse, converted by the equipment into a barely audible ping, a ping that sounded like a metronome counting down to something inevitable. Billions of people watched and didn't notice. They saw a triumph. They didn't hear the whisper of the encroaching nightmare. The first week on Mars turned into a planetary-scale reality show. NASA launched the Starsight platform, an interactive portal where anyone in the world could, in real time, accounting for the signal delay, of course, switch between the 7 astronauts' helmet cams, viewed panoramas from the rover, and listen to their communications. It was the PR move of the century. America, and indeed the entire world, got hooked on Starsight like it was a new Netflix series. The tape preserves fragments of those first days, the mundane reality of a space expedition, setting up scientific equipment, collecting soil samples, the first drives in the rover. You can hear Buddy Hayes' jokes as he provided stand-up commentary on the Martian landscapes. "Look, another rock. This one looks like my brother's mother-in-law." Drawing laughter from Emily Randolph and a restrained hiss from Commander Rourke. You can hear Lydia West's excited comments upon discovering gypsum crystals, a sure sign of past water. You can hear the measured reports from Ezra Cole on systems performance and Oliver Zhang on the preliminary results of sample analysis. Elena Cruz monitored the team's health, reminding them of the need for exercise in low gravity. Everything seemed to be going according to plan. The team worked cohesively despite minor squabbles between the ever-cheerful Buddy Hayes and the cynical Emily, or between the idealist Lydia and the pragmatist Rourke. They were professionals, the best of the best, locked in a tin can millions of miles from home. Their banter was a way to relieve stress, to preserve their humanity in this alien, sterile world. But even then, the first warning signs began to appear. Signal drops. At first, they were blamed on technical glitches, solar activity, problems with the orbital relay. The picture from the Starsight cameras would vanish for a second or two, replaced by a black screen or colored snow. The audio would cut out with a sharp click or loop on the last word. On my tape, these drops are recorded as bursts of powerful interference, overpowering all other sounds, including the background infrasound and ultrasound, as if something was actively jamming the signal. Ezra Cole wrestled with the problem, checking all communication systems, but found no malfunctions on the ship or the relay. "It's like someone's flipping a switch, Houston." His voice on the recording is full of confusion. The interference appears suddenly, with no apparent cause, and disappears just as abruptly. And then the dreams began. Strange, disturbing, and, most frighteningly, similar, experienced by completely different people on Earth. I found traces of this on miraculously preserved scraps from a cached Starsight forum. Users from different countries, a housewife in Ohio, a student in Tokyo, an engineer in Berlin, began describing recurring dreams. They always featured a red dust swirling in a frantic vortex like a sandstorm. And in this vortex, vague, giant silhouettes flickered, motionless, watching. Shadows without clear outlines, but evoking a primal terror. Some described a sensation of falling into a bottomless abyss. Others, a feeling of being watched by 1,000 invisible eyes. "It's like déjà vu, but in a dream," one user wrote. "I wake up in a cold sweat with the feeling that I've seen something incredibly important and terrifying, but I can't remember what." Psychologists hired by NASA to monitor public response initially dismissed it. Mass hysteria, an immersion effect, stress from watching a risky mission. But the number of reports grew,
and the nature of the dreams was frighteningly uniform. A red vortex, giant shadows, a sense of being watched. My tape doesn't record dreams, of course, but it does record the crew's conversations. One night, Martian time, a microphone was accidentally left on in the living quarters. You can hear someone tossing and turning. Then, a soft whisper. It was Emily Randolph. She was talking in her sleep. "No, don't look. It sees. It sees. Like my sister." Back on Earth, it was known that Emily had an identical twin sister who had died several years earlier. This fragmented phrase, captured by impassive equipment, was chilling. Did anyone at the time connect these strange dreams on Earth with the inexplicable interference on Mars, with the ultrasonic heartbeat and the infrasound hum? In the official reports, which I have never managed to find, everything was surely blamed on technical failures and psychological factors. But as I listen to this tape now, I feel the hair on the back of my neck stand up. It wasn't a coincidence. Something on Mars, that same radio-optical anomaly General Ripley had mentioned in passing, wasn't just creating interference. It was extending its invisible tendrils across millions of miles of empty space, seeping into people's dreams, broadcasting images of a red vortex and faceless observers. It was beginning to affect human consciousness. And this was only the beginning. The real horror was waiting, deep in the Martian canyons, where the echo of ancient nightmares was about to awaken.
From reconstructed fragments of the tape and geological scanner data I partially recovered, April 9th, 2019. A little over a month had passed since the landing. The initial euphoria had settled into the routine of scientific work. The rover, Dust Devil, a name of course coined by Buddy Hayes, had already covered dozens of miles across Elysium Planitia, collecting samples and transmitting panoramas of the desolate but majestic landscapes. But Lydia West was drawn to another place. Valles Marineris, a gigantic canyon system, a scar on the face of Mars, as long as the United States. It was too far for the main mission, but one of its eastern spurs, Eos Chasma, was at the very edge of their range for a short rover excursion. Lydia convinced Rourke, not without difficulty, to authorize a 3-day expedition. Her arguments: the steep walls of the canyon could expose ancient layers of rock, possibly preserving traces of water flows or even organics. Rourke agreed, but on one condition: strict adherence to the schedule and constant communication. 3 of them went on the expedition: Lydia as the initiator and lead geologist, Emily Randolph, the seismology specialist whose instruments could detect voids or unusual structures beneath the surface, and Buddy Hayes as the rover pilot and technician. Rourke remained at the base with the others, coordinating the mission. The recording from their helmet cams and their communications survived on my tape only in fragments, riddled with the signal drops that by now had become even more frequent and prolonged. But what is there paints a picture of slowly mounting unease. "The landscape is changing, Houston," Lydia reports, her voice excited. "The plane is giving way to faults, fissures. We're approaching the edge of Eos Chasma." The image from her camera, when it's there, shows a fantastic view. A cliff several kilometers deep, stretching into the distance, lost in a reddish haze. The canyon walls are streaked with layers of different colored rock, a testament to the planet's geological history.
They set up a temporary camp at the very edge. Emily installed her seismic sensors, Buddy checked the rover and communication systems. Lydia, armed with a geological hammer and scanners, began to explore the rim of the cliff. "Mark, are you seeing this?" Lydia's voice suddenly becomes tense. Her camera pans, focusing on the sheer wall of the canyon just below the rim. There, amidst the chaos of rock outcroppings and scree, was something strange. A perfectly circular hole, a dark void in the rock, about 10 to 15 meters in diameter. It looked completely unnatural against the jagged lines of the canyon, as if someone, or something, had drilled a giant hole into the Martian crust. "I see it, Lydia," Rourke replies from the base. "What do you think it is? A lava tube?" "Doesn't look like it." Lydia moves closer to the edge, her camera peering into the blackness of the hole. "The shape is too perfect. The edges are fused, but smooth, like they were cut with a laser." She takes out a portable georadar and points it into the void, running a depth scan. On the recording, you can hear the quiet beep of the device, then Lydia's surprised exclamation. "Strange, the scanner isn't giving a clear reflection of a bottom. There's some kind of echo, as if this isn't a tunnel but a bottomless void. The signal just fades out somewhere deep inside." "Bottomless?" Emily asks, walking over to Lydia. Her camera also peers into the hole. "My seismic sensors are showing an anomaly in this area too. Some kind of massive void beneath us." "Try lowering a camera on a tether," Rourke suggests after a pause. Buddy brings a small probe with a camera and a powerful light. They attach it to a winch and slowly lower it into the black maw. On the rover's monitor, which displays the probe's feed, and which, thankfully, was partially recorded, you can see the beam of light cutting through absolute darkness. The shaft walls were smooth, almost polished, with a strange, glassy sheen. The probe descended deeper, 50 meters, 100, 200, still no bottom. Depth is over 300 meters now. We're almost out of cable. And look, the walls are changing. Indeed, the smooth surface had given way to something else. The walls were now covered in a complex, textured structure resembling petrified organic matter or a tangle of giant cables. And then the camera reached the bottom, or what seemed to be the bottom. The light beam illuminated not rock, but a perfectly flat, black surface. It didn't reflect light, it absorbed it. In the center of this blackness was an object, a perfect hexagon, also absolutely black. It appeared flat, but it created a strange effect of depth, like a window into another reality. "What the hell is that?" Buddy whispers. "Zoom in," Lydia orders. Buddy tries to zoom, but the camera can't focus on the hexagon. The image blurred, the object's edges shimmered and rippled, as if reality itself refused to render it. No matter how much Buddy adjusted the settings, the hexagon remained a fuzzy, flickering patch of absolute black. "Houston, are you seeing this?" Lydia asks. No answer, only the hiss of static. "Comms are down," Buddy states. At that moment, the camera probe jerks. The image on the monitor distorts, fills with static, and then goes dark. The winch cable goes taut as if something below had snagged it. "Pull it up! Faster!" Emily shouts. Buddy engages the winch. It strains, the cable coming up in jerks. After a few agonizing minutes, they manage to retrieve what's left of the probe. The camera is shattered. The cable is melted and severed, as if burned through by something incredibly hot. The three astronauts stand at the edge of the bottomless shaft, looking at the remains of the probe. The sun begins to set, painting the Martian sky in shades of violet. The silence of the canyon feels deafening. They have no communication with the base. And somewhere down there, in the impenetrable darkness, lies a black hexagon that refuses to be seen. The whisper from the abyss had grown louder, and it was calling their names. The Martian sunset is a spectacle both mesmerizing and terrifying. The sun, diminished by distance to a tiny disk, sets quickly, and the sky turns from pale pink to violet, then to an inky black. the temperature plummets. At the edge of Eos Chasma, the cold seeped through even their spacesuits. But the chill Lydia, Emily, and Buddy felt was more than just physical. Communication with the base was never restored. Their transmitter was working. They could see the outbound signal on their instruments, but there was no reply from Rourke. Only the steady hiss of the open channel. And then even that began to change. Approximately every 30 seconds, the hiss would erupt in a short, sharp burst of static, like the crack of a whip. A click, silence, 30 seconds of hiss, a click. Over and over. What the hell is this? Buddy Hayes nervously switched frequencies, checking the rover's antenna. This doesn't feel like normal interference. It's too rhythmic. Lydia and Emily stood nearby, peering into the darkening canyon, trying to ignore the growing sense of isolation. The perfectly circular shaft beside them seemed like the eye of a cyclops, watching from the planet's depths. "We need to get back to base," Emily said firmly. "Right now, even without comms. Rourke will be expecting us on schedule." "Agreed," Lydia nodded, though her scientific curiosity warred with her fear. "Buddy, get the rover ready." Buddy was just finishing his systems check when it happened. He had stepped a few feet away from the rover to pick up a tool he'd dropped in the dust. Lydia and Emily had looked away for a moment, discussing Emily's seismic readings, which continued to register strange micro-vibrations from deep within the canyon. When they looked back toward Buddy, he wasn't there. "Buddy!" Lydia called out. Silence. Only the wind rustling the rover's antenna and the rhythmic clicks of static in their headsets. "Buddy! Damn it, this isn't the time for jokes!" Emily shouted, her voice trembling. They rushed to where he had just been standing. Nothing. No signs of a struggle, no cry. He was just gone, as if he'd dissolved into the violet twilight. His GPS, Lydia remembered. She brought up a local map on her wrist display with the team members' locators. Her tag and Emily's glowed a steady green. Buddy's tag, it simply wasn't there. Not signal lost, not out of range. Null coordinates. As if his suit, his sensors, his very existence had ceased to be in this universe. Panic began to rise in their throats like an icy wave. They were alone at the edge of a bottomless canyon, without communication, and their pilot had just vanished. "Rourke! We have to contact Rourke somehow. The emergency beacon. The rover has a powerful emergency transmitter." They scrambled back to the Dust Devil. Lydia activated the emergency comm system. A powerful signal shot into the Martian sky. A few seconds of tense waiting, and their own signal came back from the speakers. An echo. Distorted. Slowed down, as if reflected off something gigantic and incomprehensible. The beacon hadn't reached the orbital relay. It had just bounced back. "What was that?" Emily whispered, her face pale beneath her helmet. "I don't know." Lydia tried activating the beacon again and again, but the result was the same, a distorted echo of their own signal. It's like something is blocking the transmission, or intercepting it. Meanwhile, the rhythmic static clicks on the channel grew more frequent. They began to merge into a complex, accelerating pattern. A long burst, a short one. A long one, two short ones, then another long one. It was the same rhythm I had heard on the tape from the landing, only now it was loud, insistent, almost deafening. It hammered in their ears, in their temples, vibrating through their bones. This isn't just interference, Emily realized, listening closely. This is a code, some kind of signal. It's like Morse code, but twisted, like someone's transmitting a message at an insane speed. They stood by the rover, Two small figures in bulky suits in the middle of a vast, hostile desert, listening to this mad rhythm beat from the speakers as the Martian night descended on Eos Chasm. Their pilot was gone without a trace. They had no communication, and from the ether, an incomprehensible, accelerating code was assaulting them, as if the planet itself was trying to say something, or warn them, or lure them into a trap. Suddenly, Lydia remembered the signal drone, a small UAV they had for reconnaissance. The drone! We can launch the drone! Try to get higher. Maybe we can break through to the relay. They quickly prepped the drone for launch. The small craft soared into the black sky, its lights rapidly receding. An image from the drone's camera appeared on the rover's display, a top-down view of their camp, the bottomless black of the shaft, and the endless expanse of the canyon. The drone climbed, 100 meters, 200, 300. The signal from it began to be interrupted by the same rhythmic code that filled the airwaves. And then the image on the screen froze, dissolved into static, and went dark. The drone's lights in the sky vanished. It had simply shut down and plummeted like a stone, somewhere into the canyon's darkness.
Now they were well and truly cut off from the world, two women on an alien planet, next to a gaping hole into the unknown, haunted by a rhythmic tapping from the ether that grew louder and more insistent. And somewhere nearby, in the thickening twilight, lurked the thing that had taken Buddy Hayes. And it knew they were there, alone. From reconstructed fragments of the tape and data from the Habitat module's onboard computer, while Lydia and Emily were battling communication failures and Buddy's inexplicable disappearance at the edge of Eos Chasma, things were also going wrong at the main base, 100 kilometers away on Elysium Planitia. Mark Rourke, Elena Cruz, Ezra Cole, and Oliver Zhang remained in the Habitat module, their home on Mars. They were trying to contact the missing team, but to no avail. The channel was silent, save for the strange rhythmic interference that Ezra was unsuccessfully trying to filter out. Rourke, with his military composure, tried to remain calm, but tension hung heavy in the module's air. He repeatedly ordered Houston to boost the signal, to deploy all orbital assets to search for the missing group, but the tens of minutes-long communication delay made the situation even more agonizing. Dr. Elena Cruz, the medical engineer, tried to occupy herself with routine work, calibrating medical sensors, analyzing the team's health data. She was a woman of science, rational to the core, but her quiet faith gave her an inner strength. Under her suit, she always wore a small silver medallion of the Virgin of Guadalupe, a gift from her grandmother in New Mexico. Lately, she felt as if the medallion would sometimes grow warm. She dismissed it as her imagination, as stress. That evening, while Rourke and Ezra were trying to punch through the wall of static, and Oliver Zhang was engrossed in studying the latest soil samples under a microscope, Elena decided to check the 3D printer. This machine was vital. It could print spare parts, tools, even medical splints from a special polymer. The printer sat in a corner of the lab section, humming quietly in standby mode. Elena walked over to run a diagnostic and froze. The printer was running. It shouldn't have been. No one had given it a command. The platform was moving slowly, the extruder applying molten material layer by layer. But it wasn't polymer. The printer was using Martian regolith, the fine reddish dust that had somehow gotten into the polymer loading bay. And it wasn't printing a part or a tool. A strange object was growing on the platform. Small, about the size of a fist, but with a complex, irrational shape. It resembled a petrified sponge or a piece of coral, but with unnaturally regular, repeating patterns. Elena moved closer, leaning in to look. The object's surface was covered in a spiraling pattern, and this pattern was made of eyes.
thousands of tiny, microscopic eyes that seemed to be watching her. "Mark, Ezra, come look at this," she whispered, not taking her eyes off the horrifying artifact being born from Martian dust without any command. The men came over, their faces showing bewilderment that quickly turned to alarm.
"Who started this?" Rourke asked sharply.
"No one," Ezra replied, checking the printer's logs on his tablet. "There are no commands in the system. It started printing on its own, and it's using regolith instead of polymer. That's impossible." The printer finished its work and fell silent. The strange artifact lay on the platform, radiating a faint heat. Elena reached out a gloved hand to pick it up, but Rourke stopped her. "Don't touch it. Oliver, analyze its composition, but do it remotely. Ezra, disconnect the printer from the network entirely." As Oliver aimed his scanners at the artifact and Ezra pulled cables from the wall, Elena felt it again. The warmth. From her medallion, it had definitely heated up, becoming almost hot. She looked at the artifact, and it seemed to her that the microscopic eyes on its surface focused on her for a moment. Just then, the external motion sensors triggered an alert. Something was moving outside the module. Rourke rushed to the porthole. "Lights," he ordered. Ezra switched on the powerful external floodlights. Their beams cut through the Martian night, illuminating the desolate landscape around the base. Nothing, just rocks and dust. "Sensors show movement near the south airlock," Ezra reported, looking at his monitor. "There's a thermal signature, but it's very faint, blurry." Rourke peered into the darkness beyond the cone of light. "I don't see anything." "It's there, Mark," Elena said quietly, also approaching the porthole. She couldn't see anything specific, but she could feel it. A presence. Heavy. Oppressive. It's in the image itself, in the static. She pointed to the monitor displaying the feed from an external camera. The image was trembling slightly, rippling with the same interference they had grown used to. But now, it seemed to Elena that the static was meaningful, that it was forming a pattern, a shadow that moved on the periphery of vision but disintegrated the moment you tried to focus on it. "Looks like a heat haze," Rourke muttered, staring at the monitor. "But where would it come from at minus 80 degrees? The shadow outside the porthole, or the trick of light and static, stirred. It was huge, formless, and though the sensors registered its presence and a faint thermal signature, the eye could not grasp a clear outline. It was like a blind spot, a glitch in perception. "They're here," Elena whispered, her hand instinctively clutching the hot medallion on her chest. "They're watching. They've always been watching." At that moment, the rhythmic tapping of interference from the speakers abruptly intensified, filling the module with a vibrating, mind-numbing sound. And on the 3D printer's platform, the stone artifact with 1,000 eyes began to glow faintly from within. The observers had come out of the shadows, and they were no longer content to just watch. From reconstructed fragments of the tape, the last transmissions from the base, and data from Lydia's camera, the situation at the edge of Eos Chasma had gone from alarming to desperate. Lydia and Emily were alone. Buddy was gone. No communication. The drone was lost. And from the ether, a mad rhythm hammered on, now felt almost physically, causing nausea and dizziness. The Martian night had enveloped them in an icy darkness, pierced only by the beams of their helmet lights and the rover's running lights. "We have to get out of here," Emily shouted, trying to be heard over the tapping interference. "Right now, we're going back to the base." "But how?" Lydia tried to think logically, fighting back the rising panic. "Buddy was the pilot. I can drive the rover, but not confidently, especially at night over unfamiliar terrain. And what if it's waiting for us out there in the dark?" Her flashlight beam caught movement in the darkness. Or did she imagine it?
Something indistinct, blurry, darted at the boundary of light and shadow where the descent into the canyon began. "Did you see that?" she whispered. Emily spun around, her flashlight cutting an arc across the rocky ground. Nothing. Only their own distorted shadows. "I don't know. Maybe it was nothing. Nerves." But her voice was uncertain. They climbed into the rover. Lydia took the controls, Emily beside her, trying to bring up a map on the screen and boost the signal from the external sensors. The rhythmic tapping from the speakers became unbearable. It drilled into their brains, shattering their thoughts. Lydia started the engine and switched on the rover's powerful headlights. Their beams carved a section of the plateau out of the darkness before them. She cautiously put the vehicle in motion, turning it away from the canyon's edge toward the presumed route to the base. The rover crawled slowly over the uneven surface. The headlights picked out rocks, dust, and occasional outcrops. The silence inside the cabin was almost as deafening as the tapping of the interference. Suddenly, Emily cried out and pointed at the side window. "There, look!" Lydia snapped her head around. For a moment, a shadow flickered in the headlights. Vague, shimmering, like a heat haze over hot asphalt, but enormous. It slid behind a rock formation and disappeared. "What was that?" Lydia's voice trembled. "I don't know," Emily whispered. "It's moving. It's following us." Lydia pressed harder on the accelerator. The rover bounced over rocks. She needed to go faster, but the terrain was too treacherous for speed in the dark. And then the headlights died, just went out. The rover was plunged into near-total darkness, illuminated only by the dim glow of the instrument panel and a red emergency light. "What happened?" Lydia slammed the headlight button. Nothing. "The electronics." Emily frantically checked the readouts on her tablet. Power surge, then a sharp drop. Something blew the lights and, it looks like, part of the navigation system. The rover continued to coast, slowing down. Lydia tried to see something through the windshield, but there was only impenetrable blackness. The tapping interference from the speaker stopped. A ringing silence descended. And then they heard another sound, a scraping, from outside, as if something huge was clawing at the rover's metal shell. "It's here," Emily breathed. Lydia slammed on the brakes. The rover stopped. The scraping sound came again, this time from the roof. Something heavy was pressing down, the vehicle's frame groaning in protest. "The emergency beacon," Lydia remembered. "We have to activate it again. Maybe it'll get through now." She reached for the control panel, and at that moment there was a deafening crack. The side window next to Emily spiderwebbed with fractures, and the thin, icy Martian air rushed into the cabin. Alarms blared. "Emily!" Lydia screamed. But Emily didn't answer. She was staring at the cracked window with wide, terrified eyes, and then she began to dissolve. Her form shimmered, grew transparent, as if she were being erased from reality. It lasted only a moment, a flash of static, and the seat next to Lydia was empty. Only the cracked window and a thin layer of red dust on the seat remained. Emily Randolph was gone, just like Buddy Hayes, dissolved into the air, into the static, into the very fabric of being. Lydia screamed, in horror, in despair, in loneliness. She was alone in a broken rover in the middle of the Martian night, and outside was the thing that erases people. She slammed the emergency beacon button again and again, but only the distorted echo of her own signal came from the speakers. She was trapped.
And then a voice came through her helmet comms. Not static, not an echo. Mark Rourke's voice from the base. Broken, full of static, but alive. "Lydia, Emily, do you read me? What's happening? We're seeing a thermal signature, a massive one, right next to your rover." "Mark!" Lydia screamed into the mic, choking on tears and fear. "Mark, Emily, she's gone. It took her. And Buddy, it's here, outside." "Hold on, Lydia." Rourke's voice was tense. We're going to try something. We're sending out the second rover. Ezra and me. We'll be there in an hour, maybe less. Just hold on. Do not leave the rover. Do you hear me?" The connection dropped again, replaced by the same rhythmic tapping. But now Lydia knew they were alive at the base, that they could see it. She looked at the instruments. Outside temperature, -76 degrees Fahrenheit. But the rover's thermal imager, which was still working, showed a huge heat plume surrounding the vehicle. Blurry, indistinct, but gigantic. A creature that shouldn't exist, standing 50 meters tall. It was radiating heat into the freezing Martian night. She saw a flare gun on the rover's floor. Officially, it was for scaring away... what? Officially, for unforeseen geological events or aggressive microorganisms. In reality, it was a symbolic weapon against the unknown. She picked it up with a trembling hand. The scraping on the roof stopped. Silence fell. Lydia held her breath. She didn't know what was worse, the sounds or the silence. And then she saw movement in front of the windshield. In the absolute darkness, 2 lights appeared. No, not lights. 2 eyes, faintly glowing, pupilless. They were looking right at her. Whatever was out there, it knew she was here, and it had come for her.
From reconstructed news reports of the time, personal testimonies that were later erased or declared hoaxes, and my own memories. The moment Lydia West stared into the glowing eyes of the creature outside her rover on Mars, chaos erupted on Earth. It wasn't like a normal broadcast failure. It was a coordinated assault on human perception, transmitted through every device connected to the Starsight platform. Millions of people around the world had been following the drama unfolding on Mars. Communication with Lydia's team had been lost. Houston was frantically trying to re-establish contact, and news commentators were building the tension. And then, suddenly, every screen, televisions, computers, tablets, smartphones tuned to the NASA broadcast, flashed simultaneously. But it wasn't a black screen or normal static. The image became impossible. It was trying to display what the sensors on Mars were seeing, what Lydia was seeing, a gigantic, incomprehensible being. But human technology couldn't process it. Pixels on the screens went insane, forming a kaleidoscope of fractured lines, fractal patterns, and flashes of impossible colors. The image pulsed and distorted, trying to form a shape that the human eye and brain could not perceive. It was a visual attack, overloading the optic nerve. Simultaneously, a sound flooded out of the speakers. Not the rhythmic tapping the astronauts had heard. It was a monstrous white noise, mixed with infrasound and ultrasound. It was like the screech of metal on glass, magnified 1,000 times. Like the howl of the cosmic vacuum, like the death scream of the universe itself. The sound was physically felt. Across the world, windows in houses where the broadcast was on began to shatter. Storefronts, car windshields, anything that could resonate with that monstrous frequency blew apart. But the most terrifying thing was what happened to the people. Those who were looking at the screens and listening to the sound just froze. Their eyes glazed over, their muscles turned to stone. They fell into a catatonic stupor, remaining seated or standing in whatever pose the signal had caught them in. Their consciousness had been directly assaulted,
overloaded with information it couldn't process. They were alive, but their minds were paralyzed, locked inside their motionless bodies, perhaps forever condemned to witness the echoes of that impossible image broadcast from Mars. I remember that night. I was about 15. I was at home in Portland, watching the broadcast on an old laptop. My parents were in the other room, watching on TV. I remember the flash on the screen, that impossible kaleidoscope of colors. I remember the deafening screech from the speakers. And then the sound of shattering glass. The window in my room cracked and collapsed onto the floor. I instinctively slammed the laptop shut and squeezed my eyes closed, clamping my hands over my ears. The sound was everywhere, seeping through the walls, through my palms. When, after a few agonizing seconds or minutes, I lost track of time, the sound subsided, I cautiously peeked out of my room. My parents were sitting on the couch in front of the dark TV, motionless, with empty, unseeing eyes fixed on nothing. I screamed, I shook them, no reaction. Their bodies were warm, they were breathing, but they were not there. Sirens wailed across the city. I looked out my shattered window. The street was chaos, abandoned cars, broken storefronts, people frozen in unnatural poses in the middle of the sidewalk, and silence. A terrifying silence after the deafening noise. The glitch stopped as suddenly as it had started, but it didn't just disappear. It only stopped in places where the power went out completely. In many areas, automated systems tripped, cutting off entire neighborhoods from the grid due to overloads and short circuits caused by the sound wave. And only in these blacked out zones did people slowly come to, dazed, disoriented, with gaps in their memory. The power in my neighborhood was cut an hour later. My parents woke up. They remembered nothing about the broadcast, about Mars, about being frozen. They just complained of a sudden headache and asked where all the broken glass came from. The next day, the authorities announced a large-scale technical failure of unknown origin that had affected global communication and power grids. They talked about a massive solar flare, a cyber attack, anything but Mars. Reports of frozen people, shattered windows, and strange images on screens quickly vanished from the news, dismissed as fake news and mass panic. But I remembered. And I saw. I heard that screeching sound on my laptop screen before I slammed it shut, and I saw the empty eyes of my parents. That memory, that terror, that's what drove me, years later, to start investigating. That's what led me to a dusty magnetic tape in a university basement. The world survived the attack, but it didn't understand that it was an attack, and it began to forget. The infrasonic screech that shattered windows became just noise. The frozen people became mass psychosis, and the Phoenix Dawn Eye mission, it simply ceased to exist in the collective memory, as if someone or something on Mars had pressed delete, not just on the archives, but on the memories of billions of people. The white noise was the herald of the Great Amnesia. From the last fragments of video from Lydia West's helmet cam, cutting off mid-scream. The image on the recording jerks, shudders. These are the last frames from Lydia West's helmet cam, miraculously preserved on that section of the tape I found. The quality is terrible, the image is noisy with static, but you can make out what's happening, and it chills the blood. Lydia is sitting in the rover, clutching the flare gun. Outside the windshield is absolute darkness, in which two dim, lifeless eyes are glowing. It's quiet outside. Too quiet. The rhythmic tapping of interference is gone, as if holding its breath before a pounce. Rourke's voice comes through her headset again, broken, but desperately insistent. "Lydia, what's happening?" "The thermal signature. It's moving away from the rover. Is it leaving?" Lydia slowly turns her head, her camera following her gaze. She looks out the cracked side window where Emily had just dissolved. Empty. Then she looks forward again. The eyes are gone. "Mark, is it gone? I don't see it." Her voice is a whisper, full of disbelief and terror. "I don't know, Lydia. The data is contradictory," Rourke shouts. We're sending out the second rover, Ezra and me. We'll be at your position in an hour, maybe less. Just hold on. Do not go outside." "No, don't come," Lydia screams. "It's a trap. It wants—" The connection cuts out again. This time, for good. Lydia is left alone in the silence and darkness. Outside, the dead Martian night. Inside, a chilling horror and the realization that she is the last of the three who went to the canyon. She sits motionless for several minutes. The camera records her heavy breathing, the vapor of her breath in the cold rover cabin. She peers into the darkness outside the windows, waiting for the eyes to return, for the scraping, for anything. But nothing happens. Maybe it really is gone. Maybe Rourke was right. A faint, irrational hope begins to flicker within her. She has to get out, get to the base, warn them.
She makes her decision, carefully. Trying not to make a sound, she unbuckles her seatbelt. She checks her suit's battery levels, her oxygen supply. All normal. The flare gun in her hand feels laughably small and useless. She slowly turns the handle of the rover's emergency hatch. It gives way with a creak. The icy Martian air rushes into the cabin. Lydia peeks outside. Nothing. Just the stars in the inky black sky and the faint light of distant suns reflecting off the reddish dust. No eyes, no shadows. She climbs out of the rover, crouching low, looking around. Her helmet light carves out rocks and the rover's tracks from the darkness. She takes a few steps, turns around. The base should be somewhere in that direction. 100 kilometers in a straight line. Impossible on foot. But maybe she could fix the rover's lights, or at least the navigation. And then her light falls on a figure. A person in a NASA spacesuit, standing with their back to her, about 20 meters away. Motionless. "Buddy?" Lydia calls in a whisper, not believing her eyes. "Emily?" The figure doesn't move. It just stands there, staring into the darkness, toward the canyon. Who is that? Lydia walks closer, raising the flare gun. "Identify yourself." She gets almost right up to it. It's Rourke's suit. She recognizes the patches on the sleeve. Mark Rourke, the commander. But how did he get here? He was supposed to be at the base. He said they were leaving. "Mark?" She places a hand on his shoulder. "Mark, what are you doing here? How did you get here?" He doesn't answer. He stands like a statue, staring into the void. His helmet is turned so that Lydia can only see the back of his head. "Mark, we have to go. It could come back." She tries to turn him toward her, and then she hears a sound. A quiet, dry crack, like a dead twig snapping, or cervical vertebrae. Rourke's figure begins to slowly turn toward her, but only the head turns. The body remains motionless. The head rotates 180 degrees, unnaturally, impossibly. The helmet is gone. Lydia is looking into the face of her commander, or what used to be him. The skin is gray, dead. The mouth is slightly open in a silent scream. And the eyes are completely black. No sclera, no irises.
two shining, impenetrable pools of blackness that stare right at her, eyes that see nothing, but in which all the horror of the universe is reflected.
Lydia screams and stumbles back. Her camera jerks, losing focus. The last thing it captures before the recording cuts out for good is a blurry, gigantic silhouette rising up behind the black-eyed figure. A silhouette made of swirling red dust and static. It reaches for the camera lens as if trying to peer into the soul of whoever might be watching. And then darkness and silence. The silence after the scream. From my own research and observations of the aftermath, the recording from Lydia's camera cuts off. What happened next on Mars is unknown. No further signals were ever received from Phoenix Dawn 1. Not from the base, not from the rover, not from the Columbia Ares orbital module. Complete silence. On Earth, the chaos after the white noise gradually subsided. Power was restored, broken windows were replaced, and people who had fallen into stupors were revived, though many were left with severe psychological trauma or unexplained memory loss. But something stranger and more sinister happened. All astronomical telemetry related to Mars began to fail. The world's largest observatories, from Mauna Kea in Hawaii to the Paranal Observatory in Chile, reported being unable to focus on the red planet. Images were blurry, rippled with static, and data from radio telescopes was drowned out by powerful interference originating from Mars itself. It was as if the planet had cloaked itself in an invisible shield, hiding from the prying eyes of Earth. And then the archives began to disappear. All mentions of the Phoenix Dawn 1 mission were scrubbed from databases, not just public ones, but classified government ones as well. The NASA and SpaceX websites were completely rewritten, deleting any trace of the project. Physical media, documents, blueprints, the very magnetic tapes like the one I found, vanished from archives or were found degaussed. It was a total, coordinated purge of information, carried out with incredible efficiency. A week after the glitch, NASA issued an official statement. It was short, dry, and shocking in its absurdity. It stated that no manned Phoenix Dawn 1 mission to Mars took place or was ever planned for 2019. All reports to the contrary were the result of a large-scale disinformation campaign or an error in early planning documents. When journalists asked about the live broadcast, the Starsight platform, and the millions of witnesses, agency spokespeople gave evasive answers, citing mass hysteria and unverified data. The world, still reeling from the shock of the white noise and not understanding what had happened, largely accepted this version. The memory of the broadcast began to fade, blending with other events, pushed aside by current news. People wanted to forget that strange, terrifying episode, and they were actively helping in doing so. But I made the most horrifying discovery later, when I was already consumed by my search for the truth. I decided to find the families of the Phoenix Dawn 1 astronauts: Mark Rourke, Lydia West, Buddy Hayes, Elena Cruz, Ezra Cole, Emily Randolph, Oliver Zhang. 7 heroes who gave their lives on another planet. I searched for their relatives to find out if they remembered, and I discovered something unimaginable. They didn't remember. It wasn't that they denied the mission, they simply didn't remember their loved ones. It was as if Mark, Lydia, Buddy, and the others had never existed. I found Mark Rourke's wife. She was remarried, had children with another man, and had no idea who Mark Rourke was. I found Lydia West's parents. They said they never had a daughter. Emily Randolph's brother swore he never had a twin sister. The amnesia had spread not only to the event, but to the participants themselves. They had been erased from life, from the memories of their own families. It was an absolute erasure of identity, performed with surgical precision. By whom? Or by what? By that creature of red dust? By the force that controlled the static and sent the white noise? I sat in my paper-strewn sanctuary in Portland, looking at the screen of the old reel-to-reel player connected to the only working monitor I had. I was afraid to plug it into the wall socket, afraid to connect to the internet. The magnetic tape was my only anchor to a reality that was being rewritten. I rewound the tape to the very end, to the fragment where Lydia's camera cut out. With a trembling hand, I pressed the monitor's power button. For a fraction of a second, the screen remained dark, and then an image flashed to life. A still frame, the last frame from Lydia's camera. The blurry, gigantic silhouette of dust and static reaching for the lens. It hadn't disappeared when the recording stopped. It was frozen, waiting, as if it knew someone would one day turn this screen on again, as if it were looking right at me from across the abyss of time and space. The silence after the scream wasn't the end of the story. It was just a pause before the forgotten horror would reassert itself. And that frozen frame on my monitor was the silent, terrifying proof. I couldn't stay silent. The knowledge of Phoenix Dawn I, of the crew's fate, of the force capable of erasing not just data, but people from memory. This knowledge burned inside me. It was dangerous. I knew that. The entity that inhabits or controls Mars used amnesia as a weapon, and it clearly didn't want anyone to remember. But to remain silent meant letting it win completely. I decided to act cautiously, using guerrilla tactics. I created an underground podcast. I called it Red Silence. I recorded episodes on old equipment, disconnected from the network, and distributed the audio files through anonymous torrent trackers and encrypted channels. My voice was altered. I never used my name. I just told the story. I told everything I had managed to learn, reconstruct, and remember. I described the events of the mission, quoted fragments from the tape, spoke of the white noise and the mass amnesia. And I asked for people to respond. Those who still remembered, those with unexplained memories of the broadcast, of strange dreams with a red vortex and giant shadows, of frozen relatives, of the sudden disappearance of any mention of the mission. Responses came, few, cautious, full of fear and doubt. People wrote to my encrypted email, sharing their fragmented memories which they themselves thought were false or the result of a mental disorder. Someone had screenshots from the Starsight platform taken before the glitch. Someone else had recordings of the strange rhythmic noise captured on ham radio equipment that night. Some just had a persistent feeling of wrongness, a sense that an important piece of their past had been torn out. We became a small underground community of memory keepers. But it was dangerous. Several people who contacted me suddenly stopped responding. Their accounts were deleted, and when I tried to find them using the traces they'd left, it turned out no such people had ever existed. The amnesia was still at work, surgically removing those who remembered too much. In one of the last episodes of Red Silence, I took a desperate step. I deciphered the rhythmic code that had been broadcast on Mars. It was difficult. It was distorted. But I managed to isolate a repeating sequence. And it was coordinates. The precise coordinates of that perfectly circular shaft in Eos Chasma. I published them. I don't know why. Maybe in the hope that someone, somewhere, someday could use this knowledge. Or maybe just as an act of defiance. A message in a bottle cast into an ocean of forgetting. My podcast still exists, but the listeners are dwindling. The world is forgetting. Amnesia is an insidious weapon. It works slowly, but relentlessly. People get used to the strangeness, to the memory gaps, to the feeling that something is wrong. They adapt. I'm finishing my last recording now. My voice is hoarse. I haven't slept in days. On the monitor in front of me, That same frozen frame from Lydia's camera is still glowing, the blurry silhouette reaching for me. I look at it and speak into the microphone. They want us to forget, because memory is what makes us human. The memory of our past, of our victories and defeats, of those we loved and those we lost. If we let them erase that, if we forget Phoenix Dawn 1, forget the names of Rourke, West, Hayes, Cruz, Cole, Randolph, Zhang, if we forget the very fact of their existence and their sacrifice, then they win. If we forget this too, they will become our gods, the gods of oblivion. I press stop. I save the file. In the final second of the recording, after my words, the microphone picks up a faint sound. A sound not from my speakers, but from outside or from within. A quiet, insistent rhythm. It sounds so mundane, so familiar. A background noise that no one pays attention to anymore. I send the file out onto the network. I don't know if anyone will hear it. I don't know how much longer I myself will remember. But as long as I do, I will speak. Even if the only thing listening is the red silence.